Welcome back, Leominsterites. I'm your state representative, Natalie Higgins, here for the December episode of Representing Leominster, and really thrilled to be with one of my favorite Senate colleagues, Barry Finegold. We work on a couple of bills together, and Senator Finegold, thank you so much for being willing to join me on this episode.
Natalie, great to be here, and it's nice to talk to all the great people in Leominster.
Yeah, so Senator Finegold, can you tell me a little bit about your path to the Senate?
Well, you know, I come from a family of public school teachers, so I feel like the do-good gene is in my blood. So way back when I first started off, I ran for the Board of Selectmen in the town of Andover. And then I was lucky enough to be successful, then ran for the State House of Representatives, was there for a while, and then was elected to the state Senate. And, you know, for me, public service has never been about the fame, the money, or the glory. It's this warped sense that I do it because I want to help people. And I always make the analogy, it's kind of like my golf game, which isn't very good, but if I make one good shot, that's what keeps you coming back. And for me, when I can do something good for somebody, that is what keeps you coming back to public service.
No, that's fantastic. And we're working on some of my favorite bills together. So the first bill we started working on was the Safe Students Act with Sandy Hook Promise. Can you share a little bit about the motivation for working on this piece of legislation? We can share a little bit more about what the bill does.
Well, absolutely. So there's never been a time, probably now more than ever, where that the mental health of our young people is at a precipitous of need. And it's never been a time where there's been so much angst, especially coming out of pandemic. And what we really need people to do is to speak up. Far too long, when you had an ache, or if you had a headache, or if you had a broken arm, it was okay to say that. But if you were hurting, you had depression, or something wasn't going well, society basically said to you to keep it in, be quiet. And really what we're trying to do with the Safe Student Act is we're trying to have people speak up. And not only speak up about yourself, but speak up about others. Because whether people do harm to others or they do harm to themselves, there's always a trail in advance. And when those clues are coming out, we need people to speak up. I make the analogy of once upon a time when you were in an airport, you would see a bag and you'd walk by it and you wouldn't think much of it. But now we're trained to say something if we see a bag, a package that has been sitting somewhere for a long time without an owner. So really what the Safe Student Act does is it basically encourages and teaches people, both teachers and students, to speak up and help when they see someone who is troubled. This came out, unfortunately, of what happened at Sandy Hook, where there was a young person that was having some mental health issues, took a gun and killed a lot of innocent first graders. And we want to, and working with Natalie, we want to change that paradigm. So something that happened in Sandy Hook, doesn't happen again. And also in relevant times with what's going on with the pandemic, there's so many kids that need help. And instead of somebody taking their life by suicide, we hope that their friends will speak up and get them help.
Yeah, I think now more than ever, there's a growing consensus across the legislature that students' mental health and wellness is really important and that we need to be working together. And I think that this legislation does it in a really smart way that's age appropriate and gets an entire community comfortable having these conversations. And this is already happening, I believe, in your district and in a lot of across
and I have a couple of
state.
communities like Drake, that's what they're already doing it. So this is working, but there's so much more to do, and we want people to be vocal. We want young people to speak out, and we want young people to say it's okay if they need help, that they're challenged, they're having mental health issues. It's okay, and we want to get them the help they need.
Yeah, you and I are both really passionate about ending the stigma around mental health. And I think the
Yeah.
best way we can do it is having these conversations with our youngest students to
Yeah.
make them comfortable and to know when to call in a trusted adult, right?
Yeah.
When something is above what their social group, their friend group can deal with, because
Yeah.
we often share what we're struggling with our friends first before we reach out to an adult.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, and then after working on the Safe Students Act, you were actually working with a law professor of mine on a bill called Conrad's Law, and asked
Yeah.
if I would join in. Could you talk a little bit about your work on
Yeah.
this piece of legislation?
So it really is the same vein
Mhm.
that there was a young man named Conrad who was having some serious, mental health issues, that was struggling, that really did not know if he wanted to continue to live. And it got pretty bad. And unfortunately, the person that he was romantically involved with was encouraging him to take his life by suicide. And not only do we think that's wrong, but what we just talked about with the Safe Student Act, we think people should get people help.
Mhm.
But we really want to send a message that coercing someone to take their life by suicide is not only illegal, but is criminal.
Mhm.
Now, understand, if you say to someone, go jump off the bridge,
Mhm.
that's one thing. But if you know that they have suicidal thoughts and you're encouraging them to take an action, that's when somebody
Mhm.
can get charged with this crime. Because what we really wanted to do is we wanted to send a strong message,
Mhm.
really to young people, of what is acceptable behavior and what is unacceptable behavior. And as a father with 2 teenage daughters, I've never seen a time where social media is such a dominating force.
Mhm.
And, when I was growing up, and listen, I'm not a spring chicken, as you can probably tell. When I left my friend groups,
Mhm.
when I went home, when I went to my house, when I had dinner, the only way a friend could get me is via telephone. Now, listen, they actually had running water when I grew up, and they had bathrooms inside the house. So I don't think it was that long ago. But the point was, there was monitoring
Mhm.
of interaction outside of the
Mhm.
school. Now, young people never, ever leave their friend groups. They're highly influenced by their friend groups. They see everything that they are part of,
Mhm.
and they also see everything they are not part of.
Mhm.
So they are highly influenced
Mhm.
by what goes on in social media. And it is very easy to see how somebody could be coerced
Mhm.
into doing something as horrible and as bad as what happened to Conrad.
Mhm. And I'm so thankful for the partnership with Professor Daniel Medwed, who was a professor of mine when I was at Northeastern Law School, to really tailor this legislation in a smart way. So it's really taking and making sure that it's the most insidious of cases where someone has a relationship with this person, knows of their suicidal ideation, and helps them along the way, either by continuing to encourage it or giving them the means to commit suicide.
Right. And the other thing too, on a pure judicial front, this was deemed involuntary manslaughter, which you could have up to 20 years. I think that's a harsh penalty for somebody who would be involved in something like this. So what we are proposing is to have a maximum penalty of 5 years. Now, understand that the way we look at that, this is part of criminal justice reform, not the other way around.
Right.
And that is why we've had so many advocates who do support criminal justice reform to support this legislation. So I'm hopeful that this year in the legislature, we are going to do a significant and meaningful piece of mental health legislation. And what I hope is that Natalie and myself can include the Safe Student Act, and we can include Conrad's Law, because, this truly is an epidemic. this is something that has risen to a level that we've never seen. There was a statistic that was out before the pandemic that suicide rates is up 45% in the last 10 years among 17 to 24-year-olds. And if that's not cause for alarm, I'm not really sure what is.
No, absolutely. And I'm so thankful for your partnership on this legislation, and really elevating these conversations and just not letting up. As much as folks were focused on COVID-19, and we needed to be, we also needed to be focused on the isolation folks were feeling and making sure that we had access to mental health care resources. It's great that for communities like yours and mine, that telehealth became available. Telehealth behavioral health, I think, came so quickly and remove some of those barriers to access, because someone could from the safety of their own home, like see, is getting behavioral health care a good fit for me? Yeah. Are there any other pieces of legislation that you're really excited that you're working on right now this session?
Well, I'm very proud of what we just did with the election laws. You know, right now, many other states are taking away the ability to vote. We had the highest turnout in the history of Massachusetts, both in the primary and the general. And to me, that is a good thing. So what we've decided to do is we are making vote by mail permanent. We are making early voting permanent. We are making the ability to pre-process ballots permanent. So, and I do believe that when it goes to the House, this will pass as well. So I believe Natalie and her colleagues will also join and pass this. But we have to understand that if we want democracy to thrive, I'd like to quote Sam Adams, if I could, where he said, democracy works best if democracy is done by the many and not done by the few. And unfortunately, what we're seeing in other states is that I think people want democracy to be done by the few and not by the many. And we need to make sure that democracy is accessible to everybody. And those who critique that, you know, why should you have a ballot delivered to your house? You know, not to bring up Sam Adams again, but on a different vein, you can get a six-pack of Sam Adams delivered to your house, but you can't get a ballot delivered to your house. I mean, come on. I mean, it just doesn't make sense. So I'm hopeful that we are going to, you know, get that passed. That's very important to me. The other things that we're working on, we're trying to figure out that with you know, the House and with the representative, with the ARPA funds, there's a lot of opportunity to do a lot of good to increase housing. There's just simply not enough housing being built here in the Commonwealth.
Absolutely.
We need more. Housing is too expensive. It's very hard to find rentals. It's very hard to find homes that people can buy that's affordable. So that I hope will be a big thing that can really help us kind of move the ball forward.
Yeah, I think we have so many opportunities to really make statewide investments, generational investments in things like housing. I'm always surprised how our colleagues in Boston are surprised that the housing crisis has reached out to Central Mass and outside of Boston. I was like, no, we're dealing with this too.
Yeah,
it's
no,
all
I mean,
relative. Our housing seems cheaper, but it's for someone in Leominster, it is incredibly difficult. We're working with families, individuals who are just struggling to find housing that fits within their budget.
And what's going to happen is that with more and more people having more flexible work schedules and the ability to work, you know, remote a couple of days, the 495 Route 2 belt is only going to get in more demand.
Yeah.
So there's going to be pressure on communities like Leominster, their housing prices.
We're already seeing it.
Yeah. In addition, you know, we think in the next 7 years, we're going to create 200,000 biotech jobs here in the Commonwealth. Where are these people going to live? And a lot of these companies are popping up around 495 and Route 2. So we have our work cut out to try to keep up with that demand for housing.
Yeah. No, all really good points, and making sure that we're giving access. One of the things that I'm still really proud of, and it's going to be kind of a 7-year push, making sure the Student Opportunity Act is fully funded and fully
No
implemented,
question. No
because
question.
it's the best way to invest in our communities
Yeah.
and make sure that we have graduates who are ready to go into the workforce, go into certificate programs.
I mean, and that is a real challenge. I mean, that is how we become uncompetitive if we don't have the workforce to work the lab jobs, to work the technician jobs. And I think that's whether you go traditional school or vocational school.
Yeah.
These are jobs that pay very well, and we need to make sure that we have our workforce trained to do these jobs.
Yeah. Senator Finegold, one of the things that we ask on Representing Leominster is kind of how can you be a better advocate for someone who's just getting involved, who sees an issue that they're really passionate about, whether it's at the local level, the state level, the federal level. What advice do you have as someone who served in public service to get their voice heard?
Well, I think the first thing there's a couple of things. I think the first thing is speak from your heart. I think sometimes people think that all of us politicians, we have a different dialect or different language, but I think what really moves us is when we see people's passion. So I think don't be afraid to speak from the heart and with passion. Do your homework, understand what the issues are, understand what the counter argument is and why the counter argument should not prevail. And I think the other thing is that to send an email, to send a post on Facebook, to send a tweet, and to be really genuine about it. My mom taught me early on that you get a lot more with life with honey than vinegar. I'm not a fan of bomb throwers. And listen, I've had very contentious debates. I've had very, emotional times when I've spoke on the Senate floor. But I've always learned that you get further in life when you treat people with respect, where you learn to walk in their shoes and you understand why it's driving them. Like there have been a million issues I can't understand why people don't agree with me. And believe me, there's been a lot. But I think empathy and understanding goes further than vinegar and criticism and ignoring people. So I just feel like number one, passion, and really go from the heart. Number two, do your homework. Number three, come with it with empathy. Come into the argument with trying to understand why someone could actually oppose you, and be forthright. And I think if you're that, then I think a lot of people will pay attention to your issues. And I've always said that there's never a monopoly of ideas, and our best ideas come from our constituents. And I'm sure in Leominster, there's a lot of great ideas. I think that's why, we want to hear from people like all of you and hear what's on your mind.
Yeah, we're working on so many great bills that were brought to us by constituents, and something that I think is good that has come out of COVID. We're Zooming, right, to film this show. You've been conducting hearings as a chair remotely. And I don't know if you've noticed that. I've definitely noticed for Leominster, more of my constituents are able to participate in the public hearing process, share their stories, because it can be really difficult for someone from outside of Metro Boston to get into the State House to testify.
No, I agree. I think we've seen participation really go through the roof because of it. So,
and we're not experts on everything, so we really do need to hear from our constituents.
We are what they call true generalists. So.
Yeah. As a jack of all trades, master of very few.
Exactly.
So thank you so much for taking the time to chat with me today. Are there any other things we're kind of heading into the end of the first half of the legislative session? Are there any other things that you're hoping that we're going to be talking about as we? Yeah,
so some of the things I work on myself is cybersecurity is something that unfortunately has affected so many people, and there's so much phishing attacks. In the last couple of years, the people of the Commonwealth of Massachusetts have lost over $100 million to phishing attacks, to cyber, ransomware attacks. So that is something that we have to focus on. And as the chair of the Internet and Cybersecurity,
which is a brand new committee, right?
Yeah.
So that's exciting.
We're busy. Yeah, and it's really been fantastic. So So I'm hopeful that we'll get some stuff done in that area.
That's so fantastic. Well, Senator Finegold, thank you so much for taking the
Pleasure.
time to be with me this month. And
Yeah, and if I can just give a shout out to my friend Natalie, as you know, is Representative Higgins, one of the most talented, someone who does her homework, someone who is just one of the true thought leaders in the House of Representatives and the whole legislature in general. And I'm just excited to see where her future brings her, because she's going to be around a long time, and she's going to do some great work for not only people of Leominster, but the people of the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. So
Barry, I
thank you
need
for
to have you
electing
on. I
such
need
a
to
great-
have you on every
Yeah,
month.
so
This is
thank you
great.
for electing such a great representative.
Well, I really appreciate getting a chance to chat. I know it's been so hard with COVID. We don't get to see our colleagues as much. So thank you for taking the time. Thank you for sharing some of the work that we're doing
Absolutely.
together and some of the things that you're passionate about. And for everyone joining us, thank you so much for tuning into this month's episode, and we will see you in the new year.